We've been doing Dimensions since 2005. I keep coming up here year after year, more or less saying the same thing. And the elements of that same thing tend to be technology is cool, technology is dynamic, and technology makes a difference in the way you work. And that will continue through today. Probably one change since 2005, just a change in emphasis, is given the advances in technology since 2005, in those 7 years, is really it's been possible to move the relative point of focus from kind of discrete points of productivity, about task productivity, but then because of the power of the information technology available now, the emphasis is moving from discrete task productivity more towards enterprise and process productivity, starting to look at the productivity of the whole enterprise. And that, I think, is going to be a theme that you'll see here for the next few days at Dimensions. If we can get the technology to work. There we go. Yes, it has become one of the universal laws of nature. Every meeting needs to start with 10 minutes of fixing the technology before you begin. We were quite efficient here today. So this is part of the Trimble commercial here. We are operating now in 33 countries. We have people in 33 countries. Most recent examples are Accra in Ghana. An office was opened in 2012 in Accra. And probably before that, Brazil. But as you can see, Trimble is developing capability across the world. And there are really two themes that seem to be a little bit of a paradox at work here. One is to be successful, we believe we need to be international. We need to have a strong international presence. But alongside that is the need to be local, to actually understand the work process of a region or a country and adapt what we do to those local practices. And so there are really two forces at work in terms of looking at this world map. The revenue is interesting. We announced results last Thursday for the third quarter. For the Trimble shareholders in the room, congratulations. But we should end up the year around $2 billion in revenue. Right now, maybe a hair above $2 billion, but right around $2 billion. And really, since 1999, as a company, we've grown at 17% a year, roughly, which, with a few really rocky years thrown in there, is a pretty significant growth rate. 6,400 employees. We sell in 150 different countries. Now, over time, there has been a steady evolution of Trimble's strategy, of Trimble's points of market focus. And today, the snapshot would say that we have really 5 core franchise businesses that are really focused on the end user, not so much on the technology. And really the foundation of the company, cadastral and surveying, heavy construction, building construction, agriculture, transportation, and logistics. These account for the bulk, the significant majority of the sales in the company. But then we have defined and placed more emphasis in the last few years on defining new vertical emerging markets. And you can see the list down below, with the idea of recreating in these emerging markets what we have already accomplished in the 5 businesses above. This has caused changes in terms of how we view ourselves and in terms of how we approach the market and how we approach the technology. And I'll come to that here in a moment. But it also has caused some industry changes as well, is that if you compare the Trimble universe, Trimble and its competitors of 20 years ago to those of today, there has been a radical change in the structure of our industry. 20 years ago, to be a provider of survey instruments required a strong expertise in mechanical, required a strong expertise in optical, and didn't require a great deal more. The technologies required today to be a credible supplier of survey instruments, for example, it's a much longer list, requiring signal processing, software, and all the rest of it. And so as a result, there are fewer players who participate in these markets simply because it costs so much from a technology standpoint to stay in these markets. Trimble's technology our portfolio has changed over time. Our original beginning point really was on the left-hand side, and 13 years ago when I came to Trimble in 1999, we were emphatically a GPS company. That's what we did, that's how we defined ourselves, that's how we approached the marketplace. Over time we added more sensor capability to that, and then moved on into starting to focus more on connectivity in terms of moving data from the field to where it needed to be. And then it became important to establish a context for that data and the information that was being created by all these sensors. And so we started to put more and more emphasis on modeling, more and more of a software world. And then finally, the current state is to make decisions, to enable decisions based on all that information and on that the context established in the model, and more analytics to drive effective decision making. And so as a result, we have followed this. In some ways we have become technology agnostic. We have followed the user. We have let the marketplace define our technology requirements, and for a $2 billion company, we have become, in my own, I suppose, self-interested view, we have become quite a broad technology company with a lot of capability that is useful in a lot of different contexts. But a steady progression over time to define us as we are today, and in effect, the key challenge facing us today is one of integrating this technology into useful solutions for users. Now, along the way, we didn't have all the technology that was required for the solution for the user. So we have been relatively active from an acquisition and a transaction standpoint. So we have now done, by my count, 73 acquisitions and joint ventures in the last 10 years or so, not to grow bigger. That has not been the driving force, is to create more sales, but really to fill in the gaps of technology, domain, and if necessary, product. With the last 5 years really being heavily focused on adding software capabilities. So it's a long list, it's becoming increasingly hard fitting it on one PowerPoint, but the point being is if what we don't have, we'll go get in order to fill in a need for the user. Now, this morning before the market opened, we did, or actually Bentley announced a new alliance, a contractual alliance between Trimble and Bentley to collaborate in terms of bringing the model into the field more effectively. So more to come on this, but wanted to give you some early news that Bentley and Trimble have formed an alliance to, again, better serve the user by creating a tighter alignment between the model and what goes on in the field. Now, taking a bit of a high road here, the theme of the conference is transformation, and trying to come to a perspective of what does it mean to be transforming. And in effect, my view of transforming is that it alters the structure and the roles within an industry or a profession. We're really talking about not an enhancing change of, okay, so many points of productivity improvement, so many points of reduction in cost, but really changing the fundamental nature of work. That's what we're really after. And there have been some historical examples here, not by no means a comprehensive list. The marine chronometer had a phenomenal change. It enabled the determination of longitude, and therefore enabled an international system based on reliable shipping. The cotton gin made cotton cultivation commercial, was one of the fairly direct precursors to the American Civil War. The water frame eliminated the context of cottage industry and actually enabled real factories to be built in the UK. The Haber process allowed the fertilizer to be made by atmospheric nitrogen, creating a lower cost fertilizer, enabling much higher yields in agriculture, and in effect enabled urbanization. And then of course, there's the internet, which would be the first one everyone would come up with in terms of transforming changes. But in effect, the internet took a long time coming. The fact that a technology change may be profound, may create a step function, doesn't necessarily mean that it's instantaneous. The transformation of ARPANET into the internet took a long time. I think we're seeing what we're participating in here, in the industries represented in this room, we're seeing a relatively steady, but not necessarily overnight change in the way we do business. Now, again, taking the long view, looking at the step functions that have occurred in measurement, particularly geospatial measurement, for much of our existence, really until the 18th or even the 19th century, not much changed. It was a pursuit of level, distance, and angle. Our techniques maybe became more refined, but the process remained very much the same. The invention of photography was pretty quickly introduced. Photogrammetry became a breakout, a step function technology. Then came the EDM, and then later lasers, and finally the GNSS, GPS, and then later GNSS really created step functions in the way surveyors did the work in terms of how geospatial measurement was done in terms of the capabilities, but it also affected the work process, but not necessarily in a transformational way, simply made it much more productive and much more efficient. And then other add-ons, data collectors, image analysis, wireless capabilities, servos, reflectorless, all added to that. But there has been a steady progression, but it has been actually quite late historically. Now, the premise of this morning is that in this and other areas, there's something of a transformational era occurring, really created on digital capabilities that are coming into play in full force. And again, trying to establish an analytical context here, saying that there are really maybe arguably five major forces at work that are changing what we do in this room. First of all, sensors. Sensors have developed over time from the optical to the satellite to the imagery. Sensors are continuing to develop. Processing power, the capabilities in a processor have enabled great amounts of software intelligence. Data storage has made large amounts of data accessible in ways that would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. Connectivity, the ability to move data from one point to another, is to make the difference between the backroom and the field relatively trivial. That is, again, a profound difference that has occurred really only in the last 10 years. And finally, the proliferation of data has made it hard to understand. The traditional tables and graphs view of the world no longer works with the amount of data that is now available in the world. So new forms of visualization, new forms of being able to interact with that data are required. Now, what's coming is more of the same. Sensor integration, an ability to get machine-to-machine interactions in such a way that things become real-time as opposed to serial in their nature. Big data, whatever big data turns out to be, it's important. Cloud computing, again, is liberating and a form of greater democracy in terms of being able to eliminate the constraints, the physical constraints that exist at this point in time. And then a particular favorite of Trimble, 3D models, which is going to be a big theme here for the next 3 days. Now, walking through each of these briefly, so sensors are not a diminishing part of the total answer here. Sensors remain an active